The streets were utterly still. Not simply quiet, completely silent. No shop doors clattered open, no radios hummed, no children's laughter echoed from the park. Only the distant chime of a church bell and the hollow rhythm of your footsteps along the pavement broke the calm. That was what Sunday felt like in Britain during the 1950s. A day when even the passing of time appeared to stop, whether you wished it to or not. But was that silence serene or stifling? If this content speaks to you, don't let the story end here. Leave a comment, join the conversation, and help us keep these voices alive. Subscribe for more journeys through time, and together, let's ensure these cities are never forgotten. Without further ado, let's continue. In this video, we journey back to a Britain where Sundays were measured by customs, discipline, and devotion. We'll uncover the laws that defined them, the contradictions that complicated them, and the people trapped between rest and restriction. Can you recall how your Sundays once felt? Or imagine growing up in a world where something as simple as kicking a football or watching a stage performance could be considered unlawful merely because it was Sunday. Let's explore what made the British Sabbath both distinct and divisive. You didn't need a calendar to recognize Sunday in the 1950s. The atmosphere alone revealed it. Streets that had been full of chatter, bicycles, and the aroma of fresh bread the previous day were now hushed and empty. Storefronts stayed shuttered, market stalls vanished, and bus schedules slowed to a crawl. If you took a walk, the sound of your shoes often echoed louder than anything else. Sundays weren't merely quieter, they were transformed, as if someone had pressed pause on the entire nation. For most families, the day began with church. Attendance wasn't always driven by deep faith. Sometimes it was simply habit, something done because everyone else did it, as their parents and grandparents had before. You'd dress in your cleanest clothes, head to the neighborhood church, and sit through the sermon patiently. It was only once a week, after all. But when the service ended, the hush lingered. It didn't fade, it deepened. There was no shopping to do, no matches to watch, and hardly anything to hear. Even the radio seemed subdued, its schedule filled with solemn hymns, poetry readings, and gentle classical pieces rather than energetic tunes. Lunch was the heart of the day. A carefully prepared roast was more than food, it was a tradition. The entire family gathered around the table, sharing conversation and warmth for a few hours. But once the dishes were cleared, the day stretched endlessly ahead. Children turned to books and board games, or ventured outside for quiet walks if the weather allowed. Yet they couldn't kick a ball against a wall or run laughing through the street. That kind of liveliness simply wasn't deemed Sunday proper. For some, this rhythm offered peace, a welcome chance to rest, reflect, and reconnect with loved ones. For others, particularly the young, it felt as if the world had frozen while their minds kept spinning. The boundaries weren't only social, they were legal. Many activities were limited by centuries-old Sabbath laws, which sometimes even prohibited acts of charity or entertainment if they seemed too cheerful, too noisy, or too full of life. Looking back, it's tempting to romanticize those Sundays, the quiet order, the family togetherness, the simplicity of time. But how would it feel today to spend an entire day where joy was rationed and silence enforced? Was it truly peaceful, or politely oppressive? In the 1950s, Britain's Sundays were shaped not just by custom but by legislation. Much of what defined the day stemmed from antiquated statutes such as the Sunday Observance Act of 1624, a law originally written to preserve the sanctity of the Sabbath. Though born in a different age, fragments of it still held authority over post-war life. The calm of Sunday, therefore, wasn't entirely voluntary. It was, in many respects, mandated. Shops were forbidden to open, theaters closed their doors, and nearly all forms of public entertainment were curtailed, especially those involving paid admission. Even charity shows could be outlawed if they featured costumes, makeup, or anything resembling a theatrical act. The reasoning was simple. Sunday was meant for rest, not recreation. But in practice, that distinction blurred quickly and often bordered on absurd. You could go to the cinema but not to a live performance. You could play cricket outdoors, but not snooker indoors. These weren't personal preferences. They were codified rules, written centuries earlier yet still upheld by local councils and the courts. Those laws reflected a deeper conviction that moral order required legal enforcement. Preserving Sunday's sanctity wasn't solely a matter of faith. It was seen as essential to maintaining societal virtue. Rest equated to morality. Stillness signified decency. And anything resembling joy or public festivity was met with suspicion. This mindset occasionally placed police officers in peculiar situations, deciding whether a community concert or a school fundraiser had breached Sabbath restrictions. Not everyone accepted these standards. Public figures like the actor Jack Warner began voicing dissent. He didn't want to turn Sunday into a carnival. He simply sought to end the contradictions. Why should a charity comedy show be prohibited merely because someone wore a funny hat? Why was a film allowed, but not a storyteller reading aloud to children? By then, many sensed that the law no longer fit modern life. Britain was rebuilding after the war, embracing a new era of optimism and growth. Yet every Sunday, the nation seemed to rewind, legally, morally, and culturally, back into stillness. The contradictions. How could anyone make sense of a system where you could pay for a seat at a cricket match but not for entry to the game itself? That was the strange logic people faced each Sunday in 1950s Britain. The laws governing the Sabbath didn't merely limit activities. They created a labyrinth of inconsistencies so bizarre they often bordered on comical. Take entertainment, for instance. You were allowed to attend a cinema and watch a film, but you couldn't see a live play. The reasoning? A movie was considered mechanical and detached, whereas a stage performance was vivid, expressive, and therefore too lively for a sacred day. So theaters stayed dark while cinemas welcomed audiences. It wasn't about content, it was about form. And for most, it made no sense at all. Sports were equally tangled in contradictions. You could play a casual game of cricket in a public park, but professional matches were banned, especially if money exchanged hands. Even charity games faced restrictions if tickets were sold at the gate. Organizers found creative loopholes, like asking for voluntary donations or charging for the chairs instead of the event itself. These workarounds only exposed how outdated the system had become. Snooker, strangely enough, fell on the forbidden list. One could play cricket outdoors but not a quiet indoor game of snooker. Dancing was also firmly prohibited. Any form of organized dancing, no matter how innocent, was deemed inappropriate. Yet walking to a pub for a calm drink was widely tolerated. Those tasked with enforcing the rules, police officers, council members, even clergymen, were often as puzzled as the citizens they policed. Where did recreation end and sin begin? The laws offered no clarity, only tradition, and that was expected to suffice. As more people began questioning these inconsistencies, the old regulations started to look less like moral safeguards and more like relics of a bygone age. In a nation rebuilding itself and redefining its place in a changing world, the strict Sabbath code felt increasingly disconnected from everyday life. So what happens when inherited rules no longer match the way people live? For many in 1950s Britain, the answer wasn't open rebellion, it was quiet frustration. Was Sunday truly a day of rest, or a day of restrained conflict? The answer depended entirely on whom you asked. To some, the slower rhythm and rigid routine provided comfort, a pause from the chaos, a time for family, a reminder of moral order. But for others, particularly younger generations and working-class families, Sunday felt more like a locked door than a moment of peace. The divide went beyond age. It was ideological. On one side stood religious groups and traditionalists who believed the Sabbath sanctity was vital to Britain's moral compass. They insisted that even in a modern world, certain spaces should remain untouched by commerce or noise. To them, Sunday was symbolic, a stand against secularism and distraction. On the other side were those who viewed the restrictions as archaic and unjust. Many laborers and factory workers had only one day off each week, and they wanted to use it freely, to gather, relax, and enjoy themselves. To them, the laws didn't protect rest, they restricted freedom. Why should a teacher or nurse be barred from watching a football game on their single day away from work? Public debate intensified. Figures like Jack Warner, better known as an actor than an activist, spoke passionately about reform. He highlighted how even charity events were blocked if they included costumes or performances. That, he argued, wasn't preserving holiness, it was punishing goodwill. Religious leaders themselves weren't entirely united either. The Archbishop of Canterbury proposed updating the laws, not abolishing them, recognizing that society had evolved. Others, however, refused to yield, warning that relaxation of the rules would erode morality and lead to chaos. The argument spilled into homes, newspapers, and even Parliament. It wasn't just about what people could or couldn't do, it was about what kind of country Britain wanted to become. Should it remain anchored in tradition or embrace progress? Could one day embody both identity and resistance? In the 1950s, Sunday became a mirror reflecting the deeper tension between faith and freedom, stillness and motion, the past and the future. What kind of Sunday did Britain truly want? That question lingered as the decade moved forward. The war was over, the economy was recovering, and modern life was gathering speed. Yet each week, the nation was pulled backward, into silence, into ritual, into a version of itself that no longer matched the world outside. Change did begin to stir, though quietly. Museums started opening on Sundays, first discreetly, then more publicly. Cinemas pushed boundaries, drawing crowds despite protests from conservative groups. But these were rare exceptions. Theaters largely stayed dark, and dancing, no matter how modest, remained forbidden. Even charity fundraisers had to tiptoe around legal barriers. Every small shift ignited backlash. The Lord's Day Observance Society campaigned fiercely to defend the old ways. To them, this wasn't merely about rest or noise, it was about national identity. They warned of a future where Sunday would become indistinguishable from Saturday, where sacred calm would be replaced by commercial routine. Losing Sunday, they claimed, meant losing something profoundly British. But younger generations were unconvinced. Their aim wasn't to abolish Sunday, it was to reclaim it, to make it their own. A day to see friends, attend a film, listen to live music, or simply enjoy the outdoors without feeling like lawbreakers. The restrictions felt arbitrary, the reverence imposed rather than earned. Some hoped Parliament would introduce reforms. Others believed that social pressure alone would gradually erode the system. Yet throughout the 1950s, the traditional Sunday held firm. The debate raged, but the laws endured. Reformers pushed, but centuries of precedent proved stubborn. So Britain waited, through long, quiet Sundays, endless newspaper editorials, and heated radio discussions. Many believed change was near, but real transformation wouldn't arrive for decades. Can one tradition truly hold back an entire culture? In the case of the British Sunday, it nearly did. And yet, beneath all the tension, something more profound emerged. A glimpse of a nation caught between what it had been and what it was becoming. Perhaps what made Sundays in 1950s Britain so powerful wasn't merely their silence, but what that silence represented. It was a day carved out of time, shaped by faith, law, and habit. A day when people slowed down, not by choice, but because the world around them demanded it. Within that stillness, everyone sought their own meaning. Some remember those Sundays with fondness, family dinners, peaceful walks, the rare opportunity to breathe. Others recall frustration, the boredom, the boundaries, the sense that happiness came with conditions. Either way, those quiet days left an imprint, setting a rhythm that defined a generation. It's a kind of calm almost unimaginable in today's world, where we rarely, if ever, switch off. So what do you think? Was that old version of Sunday something precious we should have preserved, or a constraint best left behind? We'd love to hear your thoughts. your memories, your opinions, or what surprised you most about that era. And if you enjoyed this glimpse into the past, leave a like and share your comment. It helps others discover the story and shows that reflections like these still matter. If these memories moved you, don't let the story end here. Leave a comment, join the conversation, and help us keep these voices alive. Subscribe for more journeys through time, and together, let's ensure these cities are never forgotten. See you next time.